Hey guys, today I wanted to continue some of my room tour videos and I wanted to show you all of my minifigure pieces and not only just show you some of the cool stuff that I've got, but also specifically how I store it as well, to give you some ideas for how you could store it yourself. So in my actual LEGO collection, I store some of my minifigure parts in a couple different places. They're kind of just scattered around the place in a few different areas, but I know where they are. I kind of have my own specific sorting system, no sort of set order. But I do have this specific area here. I just had this nice sort of spot along these white shelves that perfectly fit all of these different minifigure containers that I have. And additionally, what I do with some of these containers is I put little sticky notes on them and I say, okay, in this drawer there's minifigure heads, in this drawer there's red torsos and red legs and stuff like that. So the name tags are a big help and it's nice to just store them in some of these little nooks and crannies and things. Now I'm sure you're wondering where I got some of these specific storage containers. So I got a lot of them from Bunnings Warehouse here in Australia. Of course, you might not live in Australia, but if you go to any kind of similar store to this where you can buy storage or other sort of around the house items and stuff, or even sort of separate stores that have storage items, a bunch of them exist across the world. I'm sure you can find these for decently reasonable prices. Now these storage containers come in a variety of different shapes and sizes as well. The ones that I tend to get these days are Tactics. I definitely advise that you buy a lot of the same brand because, sometimes you can get brands that are different sort of shapes and sizes and it's harder to stack them and stuff like that. So if everything's all sort of consistent and the same sort of dimensions, it's really helpful. But it's also really helpful to get some slightly smaller ones, some slightly larger ones as well for different purposes and things. So now I'll go through all the individual containers here and just break up what's inside them and the specific sorting systems that I have. So here we can see a bunch of minifigure capes that I have. This is pretty straightforward, just kind of color-coded, or ones that maybe are for like minifigure waists or different things like that. They go in a separate drawer here and there. But I also include things like flags and a few other pieces, unique stuff in here as well, Additionally, here I've got minifigure sort of food utensils and different things here. This drawer certainly looks very tasty and pretty. So I could probably split this up into multiple different containers here, but it was really nice to have all of my food localized in one specific place. So things like these hot dogs or these carrots, I tend to put them together in the one place. I also have a whole drawer for all the different kind of cupcake elements and different things. I've even put some of the sort of brown carrot stems and a few other different sort of similar types of stems together. I put them in a little plastic bag there to sort of break it up a little bit as well. I've got even like plates and pumpkins together. It all sort of just works, Now with this drawer, we've got a few other kind of just random odds and ends here. Some different kind of printed pieces that are just sort of pieces that I foresee myself using in future mocks that are, of use, or things that I want to have kind of ready access to. I do have a separate drawer for my printed pieces, but things here like different minifigure accessories I use a lot, bottles, candles, all sorts of other different things. They're all just sort of put in here. And there's no specific rhyme or reason here. I kind of just sort of started pouring different pieces into their respective areas, and it just sort of evolved from there. Most of the time, you kind of just remember where you put stuff. And over time, it's fairly easy to come back to it and go, oh yeah, I put it in this drawer. So you don't necessarily need to, organize it by alphabetical order or their discovery by man or when they came out or whatever. It just kind of works. And you get used to it, This drawer, as you would have seen here, comes with a lot of different weapon pieces here. Again, I've kind of just sort of grouped them together because some of these pieces I don't use a huge amount. So I'm happy to go, okay, I can put, different kind of shovels, pickaxes, other sort of city-like accessories. I'll just put them all in one drawer because they kind of sort of loosely fit together. Or, hey, I don't have a lot of this specific weapon piece, I'm going to put them with another piece that I have a lower quantity of as well. And also because I have a smaller amount of these pieces and I put them together with other stuff, it's still pretty easy to locate where they are because I can kind of physically see them in front of me. One thing I find with a lot of different storage stuff, as I'm sure you'll see with all these different boxes that I'm showing you now, is that if you still have to kind of dig for specific pieces, the storage may not be doing its job. For me, the best thing is to easily be able to locate it instantly and quickly, because that's why you want to sort your pieces, right? You don't want to have to go through a big 20-liter tub of pieces just to find something that's all the way at the bottom. You want to sort it so that you can instantly find stuff. So I think that's the best way to go. Try to make it so that you're never really digging for stuff. You always know, okay, it's in this drawer here or here. If that means you have to put labels on it, go ahead. But from experience with the way I've sorted, you tend to just remember where you've put stuff over time. Now, I'm sure you can see here that I have some Star Wars blasters, and that drawer's a little bit empty. That's because it's a piece that I use quite a lot. But even still, I'll leave like one or two in there so that I know in future, okay, that's still my blaster drawer. If I ever get a whole bunch later, I can put them there. So here's a container I like quite a lot. It's a lot of different sort of, I guess, kind of castle-themed weapons. You can see different sizes of bows and arrows, spears, and different things like that. Again, some of these spears are combined with different axes and things because they're parts that, maybe while they could be grouped into separate categories there, they work nicely in the one drawer together. I do also have some guitars up here that I'm sure you've noticed. Now, while those may not specifically relate to kind of castle-themed stuff, you can get different sort of lutes and things that could be for a bard in a medieval or fantasy setting. And so as a result, I just put all the other musical weapons with that because it was kind of just the most appropriate place for it to go. So don't be afraid to maybe group things by theme. That's certainly a good way to approach sorting some of your pieces there. Or even just sort of grouping it by the pieces you specifically use. Maybe you could color code it, maybe you could do it by individual part, but also there's nothing wrong with having one specific drawer that's available for you that's just the things you very commonly use or often need access to. So there's many different ways to approach sorting your pieces, and it's just about finding the right one for you. It's certainly worth experimenting with and just seeing what tickles your fancy. Of course, some LEGO pieces are naturally smaller than others. Something like this armor drawer here, that armor can get a little bit bulkier, and it's already starting to get to the point where I'm going to need to put it into a separate container there and sort of split this up a little bit here. So it's always worth kind of keeping an eye on it, and eventually when it does fill up, it's like, okay, it's time to put it into another one here. But it's so much more satisfying when you can all just put it all in one nice container. So hey, maybe that's a good impetus to actually start using some of those pieces in mocks, because maybe the drawer's overflowing. Why not put them into use and actually put them in something you want to build instead? That's certainly something that I do occasionally. I've got a bit of a smaller container here, and I put things like these lightning pieces and a few other little minifigure accessories that work, as well as splitting up some of those nice gold chrome elements as well, because they're just pretty, and it's nice to have them separate and all localized in one area. Plus, you don't want that chrome to get scratched by other random pieces, so I like to put it separate so that it's a little bit more pristine. I also have these bucket pieces up the top here, and I split them up depending on the sort of size of bucket or cauldron. But I also have those handle pieces separate, and that's just so I can customize the buckets when I put them in mocks. But also sometimes those handle pieces work nicely as a nice little accent on like a castle facade or on any kind of mock, really. So certain pieces like that where two pieces become one, like a bucket or something, but those pieces can have uses elsewhere. It's nice to separate them. At least that's the way I like to do it. You might want to do it differently, and that's okay. Yes, I also have this fantastic drawer here where I store some of these different Marvel accessory pieces, whether that's the webs from Spider-Man or some of the different kind of like power effects that you see on some of the different Marvel characters here and there. Some of them are beautiful pieces, and these containers are a little bit different as well. They're fantastic. I also got those at Bunnings Warehouse specifically, but I've seen a bunch of these containers from other different brands as well. What's cool about them is the fact that they have containers within containers, so you can take these containers out, bring them with you to your desk and start building. And I think that's so helpful and just really refreshing, because if you're like me and you build, the desk tends to get a little bit sort of messy with containers and pieces everywhere. So it's nice to have sort of easy access where you can remove it and try to keep things a little bit more tidy. All right, now let's move on to some of the different minifigure pieces. So legs, bodies, all that sort of stuff. So I tend to group these by color for the most part, as I'm sure you'll see here. And I also have a sort of separate sort of way of sorting these pieces, where what I'll do is I'll have some of the pieces that I still want to keep in my collection, but I don't use as much. And I'll put them at the very top of these containers. So that top row there will have things that I don't use too much. But the bottom row will be the sort of types of pieces that I use more often. So typically in these sort of bottom rows, you'll see things like Star Wars torsos or castle torsos, or even just torsos that I've acquired from buying sets or getting them on Bricklink or wherever I want to buy my pieces from, and just looking at them and going, oh, this is a kind of cool looking piece. I'm sure I'll use that somewhere, so I put it in the sort of higher priority pile. So again, this helps me to find things a little bit more quickly. And I'm sure you'll notice as you see some of these different examples of my sorting here, that some of these drawers are really full and some of them less so. And sometimes that can just be down to some of these colors being a bit more rare or just being a bit more common, like your blacks and your grays. Very, very, very common colors, and I certainly have a lot of torsos in those colors. But then other torsos and other examples here, I've got very few of. And look, that can be down to I've used a bunch of them in mocks before, or just not as many exist, whatever. Your collection might reflect that, it might not. But of course, you'll have pieces you have higher quantities of or not. So it's just about, finding the right storage solutions to accommodate the larger or smaller quantities of your parts. But yeah, the fact that I have the more commonly used torsos at the bottom and the torsos that I maybe don't touch as much at the top, it's all, again, about that sort of ease of finding those pieces. You know, sometimes when you see some of those larger quantities of specific pieces up top, it takes ages to have to dig through it and find the exact right torso, and because they're printed pieces as well, you have to look at each individual one until you find the exact right torso. But because I kind of know the stuff that I more commonly use, it does speed up the process of finding them. So once again, that sort of quickness of finding those pieces is very crucial here. Now, another thing I do to make things easier to find is I'll actually color code the specific containers as well, so that when I'm looking at them along the wall, I can go, okay, I can see the gray here, so gray on the color spectrum, that's normally quite close to dark gray or black, for example, so I know that they're close as well. And often they're actually grouped together, so maybe from the specific vantage point that I'm looking at it, I can only see grey, but the black might be behind it, so it's a bit easier to find it there. And again, I'm just used to where these pieces are from the amount of times I go to these boxes looking for specific pieces. Sometimes random colours will sneak in as well, just because I've got some leftover space, and it's like, well, may as well put these pieces here. And that's just about putting that on the specific label on the box so that I know that when I'm browsing through and trying to find the exact right box to get the exact right piece that I need. And maybe you're after some advice on what are some good torsos or legs to get. I mean, of course, it depends on what you're after specifically, but some of my favorite torso pieces, certainly things from specific licensed IPs like Star Wars or Marvel, they often have some really cool, very kind of hyper-specific or realistic looking kind of torsos with a lot of interesting printing on them, or references to things that you might like and stuff like that. So certainly themes like that are always exciting. I also enjoy like castle or certain adventurer themes as well, because you certainly get some more unique torso prints on those, and they're kind of multi-purpose as well, because things like your adventurers themes or even stuff like Indiana Jones, that can also work well for certain castle mocks as well. Depends what specific torsos you use, but there's sometimes some nice sort of interplay between them. But also certain themes like, even though it's not as well loved in the community, something like video can have really unique torso prints and things like that, or even beautiful leg prints. I keep saying torsos, but the legs are just as important. I don't know, it's just about kind of shopping around and looking at all the different stuff that's out there. As fun as Star Wars is, it's often the thing that a lot of LEGO fans gravitate towards. It's not always where the best minifigures are. They can be lurking around other different corners from other themes. So I think it's important to buy across a wide variety of different themes to get a good scope that you can kind of play around with and customize with. I've also got this drawer here, which looks a little bit sort of horrific because it's a bunch of severed arms and limbs and things. So I tend to make a lot of sort of purist custom minifigures where I'll sort of swap out arms and legs from different minifigures. And over time, it can get confusing as to which arms went with which body and stuff like that. So I have this sort of drawer here that I can go, okay, I'm making this specific custom figure and I need some flesh hands or something. I know exactly where they are. I'll just go over here. And sometimes I store different things too, like some of the weird arm pieces that come on some of the minion figures, or larger big fig hands, all sorts of different stuff. And it's very helpful to have this sort of drawer. Especially helpful too if you're the sort of person who, when they build their mocks, they like to sort of swap bodies around or swap heads or all the different body parts of minifigures and make your own unique minifigures, not just use the minifigures that come in specific LEGO sets. Onto the minifigure heads now. So I tend to do the totem pole thing where I sort of stack the minifigure heads on top of each other. And again, this is about making it easy to find specific pieces. I found in the past that I would just sort of, shove all the heads in one specific spot, but it was a bit annoying because I'd have to kind of scoop it out, rotate the heads until I find the exact right one, and it would just take time. Plus, as you scoop it out, you sometimes get the minifigure head spilling over into another one, and it was just a fiasco. So I found the totem pole thing actually works quite well. Now, sometimes, I like to color code them, and I do the best I can, but, things like the specific yellow heads or some of the different flesh tones and things like that, they can come in very large quantities. So those I tend to group by theme. So I'll do things like, okay, these are heads that I'll probably use for like city mocks, or here are some heads that have double-sided expressions, or these are my female heads, my male heads, whatever. Or I have a specific drawer just exclusively for the creepy-looking smiley faces. I also have this drawer here that just has a few of the sort of leftover minifigure heads, but I've also included in this drawer some third-party bootleg minifigures that were given to me, which they were given to me by friends, and I'm not necessarily a big fan of non-official LEGO products here, but I thought I'd like to keep them because they were given to me by a friend, so they just stay there because I've got some leftover space there. So yeah, some of the specific minifigure head groupings can either be by theme, or it can be very similar to what I said before. These are heads that I know I'm very typically going to use. There's certain minifigure heads that look a little bit more sort of like goofy or outlandish, or some of your Clone Wars heads can look a little bit more animated and don't necessarily fit in with other themes. So I tend to put those in specific areas. So again, I know the specific corners that I want to look at when I'm trying to find that exact right minifigure piece. Now onto all the different minifigure hair, helmet, and all your other sort of headgear related pieces. Now these are in slightly larger containers, and it's just because they're the ones I bought, there's no specific reason that they're in these. But some of these containers are really nice because you can kind of they're almost sort of modular. You can take out the different sort of dividers here and have certain drawers that are slightly larger than others or smaller than others. So again, if your hair pieces are getting a little bit too large or something like that, you can split it up for ease. So I've got different drawers for things like beards, or I have a specific drawer for female heads versus male heads, or kind of just sort of shorter hair and longer hair, I suppose, because, a guy can have long hair as well, sort of thing. But once again, the bottom row there is stuff that I don't tend to use too much, but I still want to keep around in my collection. And then the row above that is stuff that I more commonly use, and because these are a bit bigger, I then repeat that process. So that's sort of like middle row there, I guess. Stuff that I don't use too much, and then the row above that, stuff that I do use a fair bit. Now some of these, you can get some of your more obscure stuff, like your weird funky looking hats and different things, and so I tend to just group them all together by sort of loose means. Okay, these are sort of like castle-like helmets. These are helmets that require visors, or these are helmets that are Star Wars in theme, all sorts of different reasons there. And I've found over time there's certainly a bunch of these drawers that I almost just don't touch. And sometimes when it comes to that, I go, okay, you know what? Maybe it's time to sell some of these. And maybe you're adverse to selling your Lego pieces, but there's nothing wrong with selling them from time to time to make money to buy more Lego that you actually definitely will use, Like, for example, this drawer here comes with a bunch of sort of weird and obscure things like mascot suits, alien heads, and stuff like that. I actually tend to not touch that sort of stuff too much. So it's something that I am considering selling at least some of them to make some more funds to buy stuff that I actually will use. Also, I'm sure in some of these drawers you've noticed I have some actually like built figures. Some of them are castle themed, Stranger Things, all sorts of different stuff. Now the reason that they're in here is just because there was some empty space left over, and I thought, well, it's important to use that. Even though in the past I said, okay, sometimes I'll leave some drawers empty because I know they're going to be occupied in the future. Sometimes it feels like a waste of space to me, and I don't want to just have some random empty drawer lying around. So I may as well fill it with something, even though it doesn't necessarily specifically fit with the sort of, grouping or theme of this box. I still know where it is, and I know, hey, if I need it, it's in here. I do actually have specific drawers for some of my built minifigures, and I'll be sure to cover those in probably one of the next videos I upload, so stay tuned for that. But once again, those containers are grouped by theme or, specific ideas or whatever, and those specific minifigures didn't fit in those containers, so they just ended up here. Now you might be like, Ben, this is amazing, you have such a wonderfully sorted collection. Well, that's half true. I do have specific drawers of unsorted pieces. What I find is when I'm sorting some of my minifigure parts, or just my whole collection in general, it can be a bit of a pain to individually open all the drawers, every 5 seconds and put a new piece in and go, oh, where was that? So sometimes what I do is I just get some of these kind of like takeaway containers, which are very, very cheap from sort of like $2 stores and stuff like that. And they're just a really helpful thing to buy like a pack of like 50 or 20 or whatever for a pretty decent price. And then I use them just to sort of temporarily store different pieces. And then when the drawer starts to overflow, I go, okay, cool, it's time to sort this. And I'll spend an hour or so and sort them all and put it in. And to me, it not only makes it a bit more fun, but it makes it a bit more manageable as well. So that's it for my minifigure accessories collection. Like I said, there'll be some more stuff coming soon, so I'll show off my actual built minifigures and my actual kind of minifigure collection, and I might also do the same with my actual individual pieces, show you how I've sorted those and how you yourself could sort those. So hopefully there was some helpful advice in this, and it was a bit of fun to watch all the different pieces that I have in my collection. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.